This happened in January of 2020. I was 17 and in high school. My grandfather is a cattle farmer and a business owner, and he hired me to feed cows for him after school. Since I was in sports, I would leave the school and the ball field after practice, and my grandfather's properties were about 30 minutes out of town and around 20 minutes between each property. By the time I had gotten to what we will call the 80, it was around 7 to 8 at night, and in the midst of winter, it was dark and cold. The way the system worked is that I fill up buckets at the farm at his house and then drive to each farm with a designated amount of feed I needed to bring with me in order to feed the cows. And in the time I spent filling and putting up buckets, I had forgot to grab the key to the gate. And so when I arrived at the 80, I realized this. So I got out and started handing buckets over the fence and carried them 2 at a time to the feed troughs. While walking, I was whistling, "Be Happy." Just the tune itself. Looking back with the knowledge I have now, whether or not the legends are true, it wasn't a good idea to identify myself like that out there in the woods. When I finished, I walked back to the truck. And when I hopped the fence and was about to open the door, when I heard a noise behind me. Very quiet, but it was a quiet night, and I heard it coming from the adjacent property. It sounded similar to the sound someone makes when having never learned to whistle. The air blowing and every once in a while getting a slight whistle through their lips. I listened for a while and thought that it was odd, but I couldn't really think about it much. I moved on and headed to the next farm to feed. Over the span of the coming 4 days in the week, I did the same thing every day. Besides forgetting the key, I came back and would feed the cows at the 80. I noticed that during the week, the cows would not come to the troughs when called. So I would just fill up the troughs and move on because I didn't feel like trying to find them on the 80-acre property. Every time I would come back to the truck, I would hear noises coming from the adjacent property. More whistling. Through the days, I noticed that it was slowly progressing as it would when someone would try and learn whistling. Until eventually, on Thursday, it was as loud as someone cattle whistling. The whistle you see in movies and in real life. The very loud whistle when someone puts 2 fingers in their mouth to project the sound. That night I went home and laid in bed. And I thought about the whistling phenomenon that was happening when I was doing my job. I noticed that it had progressed from Monday, and by Thursday it was loud enough to fully grab my attention. As if someone was trying to do that in general. And then I also noticed that it was in the tune of "Be Happy." Like how I had done on Monday. It unnerved me, but I didn't want to put more thought into it and chalked it up to a mockingbird or some other bird. Friday was the day that everything hit the fan, so to speak. When I arrived at the gate, the keys with me. That day had been particularly hard, and so I was frustrated to begin with. And when I was trying to get the correct key on the key ring, I dropped the keys into some tall grass by the gate. I lost them in the dark and the grass, and so I grunted frustratedly and said, "Damn it." After finding the keys, I did my job and came back to the truck and was getting ready to leave when I heard noise from the adjacent property. It sounded identical to a calf in distress, or being attacked by something. My grandfather would move new calves he bought, or some from his properties, to this adjacent property as well. I didn't want to investigate the sounds, but I felt that it was my job to do so. I grabbed my phone and made my way down and across the road. I hopped the fence and started to hike upwards towards where the sound was coming from. And as I was making my way, the noises made by the unknown thing slowly started to change. They went from sounding more cow-like to more of a guttural and scratcher-sounding noise. Groaning would best describe it. I slowed my pace due to this, but I didn't stop moving. Eventually, I was about halfway to the top where the sounds were coming from. When the sounds changed again, whatever was above me on the hill started to do what sounded like speaking. It sounded like someone who had never learned English or language for that matter. Trying to sound out a word, it started to say the word, "damn it," over and over, slowly sounding it out in the most guttural and raspy voice I had ever heard then and since then. It slowly said "damn it" in this way until it could say it fluently and smoothly. Then the pitch and tone of the speech got lighter, saying "damn it" each time its voice got lighter and lighter, until it sounded very similar to me. At this point, I was confused and a bit panicked. So in a flight, fight, or freeze moment, I decided to confront the trespasser on my land. Thinking it was maybe a coked up homeless man, I was willing to at least identify who this was. I scaled the rest of the way and came to the top of the hill. As I walked over on the flat top, I started to yell, "Hey, this is private property." When I turned on my flashlight and saw this, picture related, I recently drew this for my own sake. But what I saw was something I'd never seen before and have only heard since. It was crouched down in a squat with its back hunched, and when I turned on the flashlight, its head turned from facing forward with its body and faced me. Still squatting, it started at me, and I got a pretty good look at it. Squatting, I estimated it was 5 feet tall. The face was elongated, the facial features were human, but they were contorted, longer than normal, and everything was stretched in a way that is hard to describe. Its skin had looked leathery and it was grayish white. It was stretched over its bones and its stomach was sucked into its body and it had a deep rib cage. Its arms were very long and it looked like it had 2 sets of knees. Its hands and fingers were abnormally long and ended in what looked like claws or protruding bones. While we were staring at each other, we didn't move. And then slowly, and without making a sound, it stood without taking its eyes off me, and then turned its whole body towards me. The neck was long and swung with the body, but the head didn't move. After this, it towered over me. I'm 6'1", and it felt that this creature in front of me stood above me by 2 feet at least. I was only 10 yards from it, and we stayed that way for only a moment, but my adrenaline was going off. And it felt like forever that I was being stared down by this thing. And that's when it moved its mouth. Its mouth was as long as its face width, and went from what looked like cheek to cheek. It opened its mouth and said, "Damn it," back to me in my own voice. It mimicked me almost perfectly. The tone, inflection, pitch, everything was identical. But it felt wrong. Something was off, and it was enough to where that broke the staring contest and I turned and ran. I ran faster than I have ever ran before. I came down the hill and vaulted over the fence, hopped in the truck and peeled out of there. I did come back after that for my job, and I did hear the whistling again. It's been years since that encounter, and I still can't really tell what to make of it. It brought me into the world of paranormal research, and I've interviewed over the phone and in person many people, whether they be military personnel, business owners, or your average Joe. A lot of people have seen things like this or something similar, and it's something that racks my brain often. Thoughts?